Good evening and welcome to One Sports. It's been a long time since we had the show. We had a bit of a break and we're back again now. So hopefully you'll enjoy it today. We've got some star guests in the studio today. We're obviously missing the star man here, Abdal, who's on holiday. So Abdal, if you're watching, try and phone in and hope you're recovering from the holiday. So in terms of, we've got a couple of guests here, but before I go into the guests, just to let you know, you can watch it live on Facebook, TV1 One Sports. You can tweet in, you can message us, you can phone in, and if you want to ask questions, please do. So starting off with our guests, on my right here, we've got a superstar from the commercial field in the football industry, Raj Athwal. Raj, welcome to the show.
Evening, it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for coming, Raj.
Thank you.
And on my left here, we've got Professor John Grisby, all the way from the United States. But obviously you didn't fly in today, did you, John?
No, I didn't. I live here, yes.
So
Thank you
for coming
so
down.
much for being, welcome to be here.
Thank you, John. Right, so like I said, we're live on Facebook. The number to phone in is on the screen, so please do phone in. So a couple of things. Tonight's program is on leaders in sport, and it's a round of series we're going to bring in basically, key people who made a difference in the sports industry. So tonight we got Raj and John here. So Raj, you've had a very fruitful career in football. Probably one of the sort of, BMEs, many, only a few actually, or probably the only one who's worked at commercial director level within professional football clubs. Watford, Rangers, to name a few.
That's right, and it's been a career that's spanned over 23 years. And started at Coventry City Football Club, so they were in the Premiership at the time, during the mid-90s. And as I said, from there, I was there for several seasons, 14 seasons, and then moved on to Watford. And it was at Watford that, under Graham Taylor, where I became commercial director, which entailed looking after the retail ticketing as well as all the other commercial revenue streams. And then from there, when I left Watford, after a short hiatus, I moved on to Glasgow Rangers, which was a very interesting experience. So it's been, and currently I'm working with the chairman and the commercial director at Burton Albion Football Club. So it's been a good journey.
So obviously you've got your new book out, A British Raj. Let's tell us a bit more about your book first. What made you sort of write the book? What inspired you?
Several reasons. For personal reasons, as much as I wanted to. There's a generation of Asians who grew up throughout the late 70s and throughout the 80s and 90s, and I wanted to convey what it was like growing up during difficult times, the challenges that we had to encounter with the National Front and various other things, and it was quite overt. So let's make sure that was clear, and then we were probably the first generation again to go to university en masse, and from there, trying to find your way in life, trying to find the suitable positions, and that's one of the reasons. And also to give people, and especially those from the BAME community, an understanding of what it's like working behind the scenes in football, the challenges, but also the good side, because there is an excellent side to working in football, and I wanted to give a positive dimension to it as well.
Raj, thanks for that. We're going to come back to you a bit more. John, your book, Games You Can Play.
Experience of meaning and winning, yes.
What is that about? Tell us a bit more about it.
I got very confused a long time ago. So I have been involved in sports in the U.S. On an amateur level and semi-pro, and worked in many industries across the world, including sport. And what's really interesting is that you come across leaders in organizations and sports clubs and teams, and each had a different philosophy. Each had a different leadership philosophy, and I got really confused, especially when we were doing work here in rugby and English football. We would go around to clubs, and one would have a certain approach, another would have a different one, and I really wanted to make sense of this complexity that's out there of leaders having a certain type of philosophy, and then aligning with that, and really they take in certain approaches, have certain behaviors that's aligned with that thinking.
Right. So, in terms of an up-and-coming coach, for example, what advice would you give them, and how does the book sort of give them that advice?
Excellent. Yeah, this is one of the motivations I had for writing the book. Is imagine yourself as someone coming into the industry, and you look at all these wonderful leaders out there in sport, and all the coaches and head coaches and managers, and you get confused. And you say, well, which one do I use? Well, my book looks at, in the only way you can understand this is to reduce complexity down to the fundamental levels of science. And I know I'm not going to confuse you, but there's three elements really to leadership. There is life conditions. Let's just call this a sports environment. There's the human being, regardless of race, race, age, gender, and you have the sociocultural elements, and all these combine to make a thinking system, a leadership thinking system, and when you compare the United States and the UK, and you just think about the life conditions or the sports environment, they're completely different, right? And if we drill down further, we can go into sports, specific sports like English football, and even teams within English football have completely different philosophies. And this has to do with the life conditions, how they emerge from past to present, and how they are emerging into the future. So the book really takes a look at this, and someone who's studying this, they should probably look at a leader in sport, and look at which philosophies they use. Look how a particular sport has emerged from the past to the present and emerging future, how it solves problems, what opportunities it has, and then read my book when it comes out in terms of understanding the drivers behind that.
Sure. Right. Drivers behind the leadership. Raj, obviously you are very rare, especially in the British football industry. You've probably achieved more than anybody in terms of being a commercial director at top clubs. And, obviously with the BME representation within the industry, sports industry itself, do you think there's a major issue in this country around representation? I mean, you're only a few who've done it, but, throughout the boardrooms, jobs within football like yourself, what is the issue?
If we're talking two elements here, you've got on the pitch and off the pitch. If I can just tackle the on the pitch now. For several years with the FA, there's certainly been there was several years ago a dearth of Asians in football, but now there's at coaching level and various other levels. Certainly on the pitch, there's been a lot of sort of initiatives to bring that up to speed and to give them a pathway to get into football. But off the pitch, I remember in the mid-90s when I went to the first commercial managers meeting, there was two of us, two Asians, at this particular meeting. This represented all the clubs in the leagues, and it was myself and Abdul Rashid, who was at Aston Villa at the time. Move on 23 years later, there's four of us. So I think, now I'm not saying it's down to anything untowards. Okay, so what I've made it very clear is in the 23 years I've been in football, it hasn't been down to any, I've not experienced any covert racism, so I want to make that very, very clear. But what I do believe is football is very much based on nepotism. It's very much based on who you know. So whilst I've been a beneficiary of it, I've also been a victim. And I think it is basically of bringing people in that you're comfortable with, and some of the unconscious bias could potentially come into this as well. So we have got it harder. We have to work 2-3 times as hard. But I do believe things are changing. They are moving forward. And I don't want to put a negative slant on anything. But talking about drivers, you have to still be achieving wherever level you're at.
Okay,
but we still got we've come a long way, but we still have a way to go.
Right, obviously with the FA, they're putting over the last 20-30 years, we've seen the book Asians Can't Play Football as well, and since then, obviously a lot of us have been involved in the initiatives and the strategic priorities, but has it really moved on? Because like you said, from 2 to 4 commercial directors in just over 20 years, is that really good enough? And what's going wrong, do you think?
Right, on the pitch, you can look from the days from Cyril Regis, Brendan Batson, and Laurie Cunningham, so where there was a lack of black players. I'm just using that as an example. If you move forward 20-30 years now, there's a lot of black athletes and a lot of black footballers who are internationals. I mean, the Premier League's made up of a lot of players from that ethnicity. The issue for them now, or certainly for now, for what we look at, is it hasn't been translated into management. So again, there's an area there. But off the pitch, if we're talking about from an Asian perspective, we're still waiting for major players to come out. I think Zesh was one of the very few who's come through the ranks. But again, there's not many. But off the pitch, again, I think it's a case of the football being seen as a career, football being, and it's understanding how you can actually get into football. And a lot of people always come up to me and say, I'd love to get into football, but how do you get into football? And it's almost a closed shop. And when they're advertising, it's through recruitment agencies. So you're almost, it's like a niche market, and you're trying to penetrate a niche market. Most other positions that are advertised sort of generically, but football is still a closed shop. And if you're asking how do you get into it, it's still very difficult. You know, you're almost still having to know people who are in the industry. You're almost trying to contact them to progress yourself. And so I've advocated a regulation where all positions, certainly from middle management and upwards, should be advertised at the FA. And also a regulation next to that where anyone from the BAME community should feel free and confident enough to send their applications through without worrying about their race, religion, gender, disability, and even their name being omitted from the application. So it's all based on merit, irrespective of your colour. It should be based on merit.
Right, I'm going to come back to you on another question in a bit. Okay. But John, United States, right? So is there a big difference? Because we know we got, US have got top black players in, American football, in baseball.
Yes.
What about the jobs, the top jobs, the boardrooms? How does that compare to the UK?
Yeah, it's a great question. They're completely different, but have the same problem. So if there are these, if we go back to the science again and look at the life conditions or the sports environment, there are these changes that sectors go through. Isn't it interesting that in the early days of basketball in the US it was all white? Because those were the sociocultural elements, and that was the environment at the time. That shifted to be predominantly black. Isn't that interesting? Now we have a shift because life conditions have changed, sociocultural elements have as well, and now, so we've gone through the player phase. Now we have to go through the managerial, and the top managerial and the top positions like execs and directors. And it will take capacity to do that. So it takes, it will take leadership at the top to understand how to design ways in which you can facilitate not necessarily, it's not going to be a very smooth transition. There will be bumps in it. But like the US, they put in the Rooney Rule. Now for that place and time, the Rooney Rule worked. The Rooney Rule is starting to slowly not slowly lose strength, but it's becoming less prevalent because there are more black managers, black head coaches coming up. But the rule needed to be in place. Something here, I'm not saying it's the Rooney Rule, but something here needs to be implemented in place in order for that transition to happen.
Right. Raj, on that question, obviously you mentioned the lack of BMEs, especially Asians in football. What is the problem? Is it they haven't got the skills, they haven't got the credentials, the qualifications? Why? What is it? Because we got thousands of kids playing football week in, week out. We got intelligent people in business. Why they're not in boardrooms? That's what baffles me. What do you think that is?
Well, from the football perspective, I think we've suffered over the years from stereotypes, and to a point, it's perhaps subconsciously still there. I mean, where there was a question of mentality, diet, even from a family perspective, it wasn't seen as a career set 20, 30 years ago. But that's totally changed now, and I still believe that for me, the day we see an Asian in the Premiership on the team sheet is the day we've made it. Okay, and until that happens, we've got a long way to go. Now, why are we not in there? In all honesty, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking to managers on a regular basis. They're telling me if the player's good enough, they're in. Is it because there's a lot of talent? I don't know in terms of across the board. And it's a fact that over 97, 98% of academy kids will never make the grade as a professional footballer. And so you've got to look at proportionately how many of those Asian players are in that school of academies. And if you're talking 97, 98% of kids are never going to make it, is it down to race, or is it down to talent, or is it down to the perception of the coach thinking, well, I don't know, it's a hard one, is it unconscious bias? I can't answer it, but there will sooner or later, there has to happen, because there's some fantastic players that should have come through. We had 2 players at Coventry that definitely should have made the grade, but for whatever reason they didn't. So it's very easy to use the race and to say it's because of the colour or this. That's not always the case, and I want to make that clear as well. But at the same time, it's a tough one to answer, because there are some fabulous players out there. But
do you think, you know, with the academies, obviously you could go into academies at the age of 5 or 6 and be there for your entire childhood. Now, is that a wise thing to do? Maybe, you know, some kids might excel at a later date. So if you're not in academy at 7 or 8 and you're going probably 14, 15, if you get the opportunity, you know, would that help an Asian player?
I think, right, as much as it would help an Asian player, I think we also need to understand that physicality-wise, from 14, 15, you could be a great player, but at 16, 17, other players physically may be different. And I think also in this country, we prefer big physical players. Now, I think an Asian player would excel in Europe, Spain, or other countries, in my opinion, because they're more technically gifted, and they're more, and the coaching is more about technicalities as opposed to the strength and power that we have in this country, which we see on a regular basis. I mean, we see it in academy games when I'm going and watching teams, and they're all big physical players. So you've got to look at the strategy of the actual and the culture of the countries as well, of how they operate, and that's how we operate in England. But talking about boardrooms, it's proven. I mean, Asians are successful business people, and I've always said that clubs need to be careful when they're bringing out statements saying we need to be reflective of the communities we serve. It's all very well saying that, but then what are you actively doing, trying to open up the opportunities for everybody, irrespective, for the wider community, not just for Asians. It should be for everybody. And for me, the key is, does the chairman actually see an Asian representing his football club? Would he want that? And then these are the questions. I know they're difficult questions, but they're the questions we need to ask. We have plenty of foreign ownership in this country. As you know, a lot of clubs are Chinese owned. There's some Asian owned, but yet the CEOs are not Asian. So we've got to look at that side of the case as well, and try and understand that is there any reason for it? Because from a business perspective, we're creative people. You know, you get a different, diverse background in a football club, and it's been proven wherever we've been. You have a different way of thinking. You attract a bit wider audience, and certainly at Coventry, I mean, myself brought along 2-3 directors who put in 6 figures to become directors on the board, and a lot of that was because they felt, with myself being there, that club, in their heads, it was an open football club, and suddenly it gives that personification as well. But it's a difficult question. I don't think there's a simple answer to why we haven't got players or people in the boardroom. We can only surmise of what we believe there could be the reasons.
Do you strongly believe that we got the skill set and the experience to be in the boardrooms and executive type roles?
Yeah, 100%. It's been proven. Every football club I've been to, I've left them in a better position. I went to Rangers, Glasgow Rangers Football Club, when they were liquidated, and the marketing director said to me, "You've brought in more revenue," not me personally, but as a team, with the ideas that we implemented in the first 7-8 months than the previous guys did in the Premiership. And I think that says something. It wasn't just me, it was our team, but it was a diverse team.
But you bought a sponsor, shirt sponsors. Do you want to mention the name?
Yeah. Well, if I'm allowed to mention it.
Go for it.
I brought in, we had 3 months, and I brought in a 32 red, which is still at Glasgow Rangers today.
That's a major achievement, and especially, you know, when they went through the troubles, obviously administration, etc. As a club now, Rangers, whilst we're on the subject, you know, obviously it's difficult with the Celtic Rangers, you know, rivalry. You know, it's quite strong, isn't it? You know, one of the toughest in the world. How do you find Rangers as a club? You know, they've got the British flag, for example. You know, people perceive it in a different way. You know, if you're looking from the outside, what's your personal view on that?
I get asked this question a lot, and when I actually was offered the position at Rangers, and I told certain friends and family, they were like, "You're going to Glasgow Rangers," and the perception of Rangers was that it's a right-wing club, and there are commentators who try and tarnish the name of Rangers. I can categorically tell you now that was a fabulous club. It's not right-wing. It's a British club. And unfortunately, the word British and the Union Jack is misrepresented. As we know, certainly from the 70s and 80s, the Union Jack or the Union flag was hijacked by the right wing. And unfortunately, there are still people who see that and still see those images.
Right.
But that's not the case. When I went there, I was treated fabulously. I never once had any form of racism from the fans, the corporates, or the staff. And they would not tolerate any racism within that club either. So there is unfortunately a perception that's totally wrong, and I will to this day back that football club. It's a fabulous football club that did a lot for me. But for those who are into football would know the rivalry between Celtic. But it's until you're there, it's very intense because it is based on religion.
Yeah.
And at times it was like going to a religious institution, going to Rangers, and it was just strange. But it was amazing football club.
See, when a lot of, especially sort of Asian youngsters, but also the Asian community, when they look at yourself and they see Rangers, it's massive, it's inspirational, So we need guys like you, more of you guys, in the boardrooms, in these executive type roles, directorship roles. Would you go back to Rangers if you had the opportunity?
Would I go back to Rangers? I don't know. I absolutely love the club, just like I do. I'm a Coventry City fan, and Watford were fabulous to me. I think if I had an opportunity now, certainly in the future, I would look to work abroad, to utilise my experience and knowledge, having worked in English football in the Premiership and for a Champions League club, but also because I feel I've got a lot to learn from abroad as well, which I would like to do. So I'd like to give it a go abroad, be it America or in Europe.
We're going to come back to that in a bit. John, very quickly on your one.
Yes.
Your leadership, focus. So we're talking about leaders at the top who make the decision makers. How do you change their perception in terms of getting the right skills? On merit. No one's saying give someone a job because they're black or they're Asian.
Right.
On merit, how do you change that mindset?
Well, that's an interesting question. So first of all, let me clarify that leadership can happen anywhere. It really depends on the club or the team and how they perceive leadership. So one club may perceive that one person does and no one else does, and that's fine as long as it works for them. And other clubs might say that there's leadership within it in many different positions. But when we talk about leadership at the top and skills, again, we're playing this game. We're playing a little catch-up game or developmental game of, it takes sectors nearly a generation and a half to 2 generations to change. So what we're experiencing now, this discomfort, this confusion, this complexity, of course there are individuals in the Asian community who have the skills to be in a boardroom. They're fantastic entrepreneurs, and they've built really innovative communities, connected, and within football, I imagine as well. However, again, we're at this game of the top level. You have to ask your question: what is the mindset? What are they thinking? Why won't they give someone of a different race or gender an opportunity? And of course they'll say, yes, we will, but one thing is to say it and the other one is to actually implement it. And you're working against you're just pounding against a wall. You may do that for a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade, but eventually, as life conditions change, thinking will as well, and those will start to crumble or dissipate, and the thinking at the top of, we don't want any Asians or women here, that will no longer be recognized.
Right.
I remember during the World Cup seeing women commentators in football, and it was fantastic to see this. So you have the Ryan Giggs and the you have all these famous football players, and you have the women commentating as well. Would that have happened 4 or 5 years ago? In people's minds, probably not. But if you look around since then, there have been things that have happened in society that have made that a possibility. And so the same will happen here.
Right.
Football is Raj and I had a really interesting conversation before this. Really, don't quote me in the U.S., but soccer, as we say in the U.S., is just global. it's bigger than the
Then hold your
NFL.
thought there for a minute, and I'll come back to you
Okay.
because we've got to take a break now. So please join us after the break. We've got a few questions from viewers, so we'll answer these questions after the break. So see you in a short while. Welcome back to the show. I hope you had a nice cup of tea or coffee. Now, John, before the break, we asked you about
Yes.
the leadership and the barriers and
Yeah, at the top. And my last point was that soccer is on a global level, and there will be many changes in other countries in how they perceive Asians or women or other people alternatives to the board, and that will break through systems. If England doesn't adopt it, they will at a certain point.
right. So you're quite optimistic that's going to happen.
Yeah, it will take time.
Yeah.
It will take time, but as we're moving through this digital networked world, it's very accelerated, and it might happen sooner than we think, but it will not be a revolution.
Right.
It will be a slow evolution.
Right. Okay. Before I move on,
Yeah.
I'm going to mention a quote in regards to your book.
Yes.
Yeah. You have a quote. It says, "The possibility for any team or player to grow, develop, and perform to their full potential
Right.
is never greater than the quality of the leadership." What
Yes.
does that mean?
It means that the leader in any role has a tremendous responsibility, and they literally they're harnessing the resources of a club, of a player, and they can facilitate an enormous amount of potential and success. So if they have enough capacity and capability to do that, that can lead to some extraordinary feats.
Right.
But if a leader does not have the capacity or capability, it can actually turn on them. So in essence, it's you're looking at a club or a player, or they're really at, they can only have the amount of success that the leader has in capacity and capability. If they don't have more depth, they can't move beyond that. They're not capable of doing that. Even though they may have the potential, the leader is not facilitating the release of that,
Right. Okay.
if that makes sense.
So with the methodology, then, so we got sort of young people watching,
Yes,
and they want to move into a senior position
yes.
over a period of time. Is there a possibility if they follow this philosophy? I mean, what chances do they have?
Well, the book lays out there's 7 thinking mindsets
Right.
of leaders in sport, and we look at the DNA and how they think.
Right.
So it's really applying these mindsets to English football, because if we apply them to the U.S., they're different, and to basketball, they're different, et cetera, et cetera. But if we apply it to English football, you begin to understand what elements are functioning
Right.
and how they're functioning and why they're functioning the way they do, or why they think the way they do.
Right.
So it's really designing the young people who read. They begin to understand culturally how that is, and begin to design a plan for themselves. How do I get in the boardroom if this exists now? What changes may take place?
Sure.
What will I have to deal with?
Right.
So they can acquire the skills and the capacity to actually, be in the position of leadership.
Sure. Right. So in terms of the youngsters, obviously you do a lot of work with top executives,
Yes.
FTSE 100 companies, sports leaders. We're talking about top ones. How do you, obviously they're set in their ways.
Yes.
How do you change them?
It's a great, it's a great thought. Change. You identify the places where the change, there's potential to change.
Yeah.
So when you go in, you speak to someone, and there's a great first sign in that they're interested. So we have something called an open and closed and arrested mindset. So a closed mindset is they don't want anything. Their philosophy is best. They know what to do. They don't want anything from the outside. An arrested is maybe I'll take a look, and an open is you're willing to do that. So when you go and you start working with someone, for one thing, you do an assessment on them and see where their mindset is, more or less, to understand if it's open, arrested, or closed, and what elements make up that socioculturally, et cetera. And you ask them actually a problem. You ask them, so what problems are you dealing with now? And they'll kind of tell you their problem, and you'll say, so what are your solutions? And if they say, well, there's only one way to do it, and it's this way, there might be alternatives. So you're actually presenting. You want them to be able to, especially in this era of complexity, present other types of philosophies that may help them solve the problem rather than just one way.
Right.
Because if you continue down the road of only having one way to think and solve a problem, eventually it has something called diminishing returns. It does not work anymore.
Right.
So imagine a philosophy in sport about 50 years ago, where it was the pain, right? No pain, no gain. If you don't balance that out now with some other methodologies or some other ways to soften that pain for gain out and let recovery happen, et cetera, your athletes are going to burn out.
Absolutely.
Right? They're going to get injured. And so you need to be open to philosophies, and you need to be able to take in people who understand other philosophies that connect with your overall strategy in order to help you facilitate that potential, if that makes sense.
Hard work that is, isn't it? Eh? Are you getting through to them?
It's very difficult work. It's called natural design, and really you're using the basic elements of culture and their environment, the cultural environment, to help them design a strategy that's going to have long-term returns. It's very difficult. As I say,
let's hope it makes a difference, to the industry here in England as well.
It's very difficult for people to change and sectors to change, but you have to do it slowly.
Raj, coming into you, I've got a few questions there. So a lot of people want to know, in terms of your book, more obviously content within the book, how did you get into, tell us a bit of a story about how you got in
How I got into
to
football.
the sector that you are,
As I said, after graduating, I applied for hundreds of jobs. I was not a doctor, not a dentist, not a accountant.
Were you interested in football at a young age?
I was. I played a lot of football, and up to senior age. Obviously, not good enough to make the grade, but football, it's like most people. I absolutely love the game.
I think in your book you said you had a dream, was it to play for Coventry
Dream to
City?
play for Coventry City Football Club. Yeah, unfortunately that dream didn't come true. Certainly not on the pitch, but off the pitch it did. But it was absolutely just fortuitously. We were driving by Highfield Road at the time, and Coventry were playing Norwich. And I was with a friend of mine just turned around and said, you've applied everywhere for jobs, and I didn't really specifically know what I wanted to do at the time. And he said, you're a big football fan, why don't you apply to Coventry City Football Club? And my first reaction was, to do what? Besides football, I didn't know what else football constituted of. And so when I did a bit of research, I didn't know about corporate hospitality or the conference facilities and all the other commercial revenue streams that existed at the time. So I wrote to, rather than write to HR, I wrote to Brian Richardson, or my brother helped me put a fabulous letter together, to Brian Richardson, who was the chairman of Coventry City at the time. And just not for a job, just to ask to see him, and because I wrote hundreds of applications. I never once got an interview, and I wanted to understand: is it the application? Is it me? What is the issue? And so it wasn't certainly lack of trying. Lo and behold, he wrote back to me and said that I'd like to see you in the new year. And so we arranged a meeting. I went to see him, and this is actually a true story. I took all my rejection letters. I took my CV, and I guess it was an act of desperation. I sat down and I put my CV on his desk and put my rejection letters on his desk, and just said, he said, what can I do for you? I said, Brian, I just want an opportunity in life. I'm a big Coventry City fan, just give me a chance. And he said, what experience have you got? And I just said, look, I don't have any experience, but I'll learn quick. So we got the sales director in, and the sales director obviously didn't have an understanding of what I was there.
How old were you at the time?
I was sort of just graduated.
Really? Wow.
Just graduated. So he 2 weeks later they gave me a junior sales role, and I remember the sales director saying to me, and it's in the book, we can pay you £8,000. It's mid-90s, we'll pay you £8,000 a year, not a week. and
That's a
thinking
decent
I'll
salary.
turn it down, and I was like, no, I'll take it. For me, it was a case of it wasn't the money, it was the opportunity,
Sure.
and everything comes in time. And 2-3 years later, I spoke to Brian's daughter, and she said that he went home that night and said, this young lad's come into my office asking for a job, I'm going to give him a chance. And so what I learnt that day, and I've kept it with me ever since, and it's in the book, is that go to the top. Whatever you want to achieve in life, you have your ambitions, you have your goals, you have your objectives, but you go to the top, because HR will only they'll only deal with what's relevant at the time and what's available, and they'll file it. But at the top, you can make that change, because people at top very, very rarely are contacted. And so the book itself is a thought process going through. It's my thought process of what it was like working behind the scenes at Coventry, Watford, Glasgow Rangers, what we had to get involved with, and there's a correlation with a lot with what John says about evolving. And I've actually said in the book that every 2-3 years you have to evolve. You have to bring new changes in, be it technology, be it changes in the consumerism, behaviourism, be in geopolitics. It changes all the time. And as John has articulated far better than me, that they're the things that I've brought into the book. So I give people an idea of how I got into football, what goes on behind the scenes in football, what you have to be, your mentality, your understanding. And you have to put in 3-4 times more work than most people, and so I've put that in there, and there's a message right the way through there. So, and it's open for everybody. But I was very, very candid about what I had to do and
That
my
is
my
very
failures
inspiring.
and everything. So, and I've had a lot of failures. There's areas that I've not done very well in. There's areas that just didn't happen for me. But the easiest thing to do is just fall by the wayside. But I kept going, and that internal optimism just keeps you going in that belief and that faith.
That is amazing. Viewers, any questions for Raj? The other thing, your book, where can people purchase the book from?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and I believe certainly locally Waterstones have contacted me, so they're going to start stocking it. But Amazon's probably the best option.
If you got any more questions or want a link, get in touch with us, and we'll get you in touch with Raj, or go on Amazon and purchase the book. Very inspiring. Raj, one more thing. Obviously, it's tough, it's difficult, and I think back in 2012, you were recognised Asians in Football Awards, behind the scenes, for your amazing achievements. How did that feel? Did that inspire you? Did you feel a sense of achievement? What do you feel you got out of that?
Yeah, I actually attended the event not expecting to win. That's the honest truth. So I didn't have a speech ready or anything. And when it got to my category, it was the inaugural Football Awards, Asian Football Awards, which was endorsed by the FA. And when it got to my sort of category, they sort of mentioned the names of the shortlist, and which I was on, and then they mentioned my name. And this is the honest truth. I thought they were going from 3 to 1. So I just sat there, and so they're asking, "Look, Raj, where is he?" And my wife's going, "I think you've won." And I goes, "No, I think that's 3 to 1." And so obviously I got on there, and it's the only award I've ever won. I was very, very proud, because for me, it almost endorsed all those years of toil, all those years of I didn't do very well at school. I only got 2 O levels to begin with, so everything is in the book. I'm not a grade A student, let me make that clear. I'm proud of it, I'm just saying that that's me. So I've had to work for everything I've had to achieve. And so for me, it's the first award I've won, and it meant so much to me, because I felt that I finally have done something, after I don't know, 15, 16 years in football. Well, actually, it was 20 years in football at the time. And it also proves that through belief, faith, and hard work, and even days when you're having those bad days, those indifferent days, you've got to keep going, because it's so easy to stop. And so yeah, it meant so much to me.
That is inspiring, Raj.
Yeah.
That is very inspiring.
Yeah.
John, I'm going to come back to you on this question. Obviously,
Right.
Raj has had to work hard, over a long period of time. He was brave, he was bold, writing to the chairman,
Absolutely.
going and seeing him. Not everyone's going to do that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got to take your chances. Now, to break that, he's broken that barrier. Now, from the time when Raj has actually got the job at Coventry City, he's worked at Watford, at Rangers, big clubs we're talking about, not your average club. How do others, because Raj, for me, someone like Raj, should be within the boardrooms of the FA, within the governing bodies and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to you on that, Raj, like a bit later on. I know it's a little bit controversial. I'm putting you on the spot, but I think I'll ask that question. Now, how does a youngster or someone aspiring to get into football at that senior level like Raj, do you think that puts them off? Because, they would probably expect Raj to be within these governing bodies, because Raj then can actually give an open opportunities for others as well, if he's within a sort of a area of power
Right.
within the authorities.
Right. Yeah, that's a complicated question to answer, but there are many ways. So one, taking Raj as he's an inspiration, and saying, this is the way he did it. So actually, I'm gonna follow that way. It's the blood, sweat, and tears. It's the writing. It's the contacting people. The big differentiator that we live in today is education. So they're going to need to know how to sell, or how to do some type of skill, premium skill, that's at boardroom level, and that takes a lot of time. Human beings were really interesting. We play this. We play this game, and it's part of how we're made. We play this game of us and them, and it doesn't matter if it's us man, you woman, us black, you Asian, us white, you Chinese. It's part of how we evolved, and parts of it are healthy expressions. It's how we make culture. It's how we define ourselves. But other parts are very unhealthy, and that unhealthy expression is forming these types of systems that will refuse to break. And what we have to do is just to keep, as I said before, just keep educating yourself, keep pounding on the door, get yourself diplomas, get yourself certificates, get yourself an MBA, learn, get yourself within the sector, associated with different thinking types of people, and just work the system.
Sure.
And there will be parts of the system that will naturally say, because they don't want you in, they will naturally say, we don't want you here. But you have to break through that and continue to go. And that is really how, that's really how it starts.
Sure. Raj, now I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, I apologise. But obviously yourself, I know you worked in football for a very long time, got the experience, got the expertise, we know that. Now, someone like yourself, were you ever interested in going to the boardrooms of the FA, within the Premier League, within the governing bodies? Did you have that interest?
I did, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years. But before I answer that, just to go back to what John just said there about working the system, he's absolutely spot on. And the 3 key areas for me was accessibility, transparency and accountability. And I think he's absolutely right on that. But going back to the boardrooms, I've tried with the FA, and it's well known, it's not a secret, for several years, and again, all on merit. And it goes back to potentially nepotism again, where there was a position came up, a senior director position, several years ago, and I spoke to Martin Glenn about this, so it's he's aware. And to be fair to Martin, he's had a lot of criticism, but he's in my opinion he's doing an excellent job. He's doing well, and it was a case of we got to the final rounds, and in the end they were saying to me various reasons we can't put you forward for this, and I was saying. In the end, the recruitment consultant said to me it was down to they'd chosen someone from the inception. So the whole interview process was the waste, and I believe now that they're changing that. But going back to working for the FA Premier League, this is a constructive observation, not a criticism. That I'd only recently, only 2 weeks ago, spoke to a director at the Premier League, and they've got a huge programme in South Asia. And my question to the director was that. Do you think it makes a difference to have someone who's worked in football for over 2 decades? Yeah. The fact that he understands the culture? Yeah. The fact that he's fluent in the language? Yeah. The fact he's commercially, well, let's use the word expert. Yeah. So I'm the person. How can I work with you? It wasn't necessarily about a position. It was also about me perhaps working with the Premier League and perhaps even on a voluntary basis. And the answer came back was that really sorry, but stay in touch. That's what came back.
So
this is 2 weeks ago.
So if I can add to that, That's a really interesting situation. So in order for this to change, there's one thing that this group will prize, which is money, which is commercialism. And you bet one day when India comes knocking with the numbers, and they may want to see an Asian to Asian, they will put someone in that position. It'll be because, yeah, you've got great talent, you know the system, etc. But there's another benefit to them. Does that make sense? So it's getting wrapped around in these benefits as the sector's developing, and this is facilitating someone to slot into a role.
Sure.
So it's pressure. It's pressure from other places, not just. Listen, I have the experience and I have the experience to handle this role, and I can do this. Well, that's great, but not a lot of pressure. But when you have pressure from outside saying, "Wow, look we have this market here, and it's like Indian to Indian. We need to." You make sure that you're the guy there, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then some people will say, "Oh, well, they're just putting Raj in because he's Indian," and you say, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll take it." But look at all the experience he has. He has a book out. He doesn't have to prove anything. Yeah. But he's in the position. But that starts a completely new developmental process for other people. Now he is in this position in this position in the FA, and other people look to him.
Why can't they see that sort of the people who are recruiting within the FA? So we're talking about the council. We're talking about board members who've been there for 50, 60 years, some of them. Sorry to call you dinosaurs, guys, because I know a lot of people watch this program as well.
Yes.
But someone like Raj, for example, who's got the expertise, and just by being on the board, he brings in a different market. We're talking about masses.
Yes.
In India, in Asia, millions. We're talking about. That's a massive commercial revenue. For the likes of the FA and the Premier League. Why are they not sort of recognizing that?
It's there are people, there are groups, and it doesn't matter if it's black, white, Asian, whatever. I look at this as in what it is. It's a thinking system, because once you move beyond the gender and the race, etc., you move to the thinking system, and this has no color, has no gender to it, and you can take them to the edge of and look out over the sea, and you could say that the world is not flat. It's round, and they will say no. There's a monster behind there. And you'll say, no, but we have a ship and we can sail it, and it goes around. And they say, no, it will drop off. So there are people who are stuck in that mindset. And it's I know I'm using something quite old, but we can even come to we could look at Bill Gates and not being able to see the internet, right? There are people who can't appreciate or see what value that has. And that's a closed mindset. And you have to think, how am I going to deal with this? So there's a couple ways that you deal with these mindsets that are closed.
It's mentioned in your book, all of that?
Yes. Excellent. So you either leave the mindset alone and you let it spiral, or let it disintegrate, which as I say, outside pressure will do that. It'll come knocking on. Okay. You can try to change it yourself, which is very difficult. And this is part of why it's difficult for me. You literally have to hold up a mirror and make them aware of things and see if they see it in the mirror. And if they don't, well, then if they can't make the change, they cannot be forced to make the change.
Right.
Then there's other people around their system that they are maybe friends with who might have a open mentality or an arrested, and they can sit with them and say, listen, you know what? We have this opportunity here, and we need to hire Raj, and we it's a great opportunity. He's Asian, so you use other elements to break that thinking down. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
So there's many, and again, this is why you kind of need to go through it strategically to see what you can use, what different types of elements you can use in order to get what you want to achieve.
Right, Raj, very quickly, I think we're running out of time here slowly. Just very quickly, in terms of, going, John talked about being globalising things, you know. Would you sort of look at beyond the UK and Great Britain
Do you mean personally?
personally, and do you think people should, you know, in general?
Do you mean job-wise for me?
Job-wise, yeah.
Yes, I do. And we were talking to John earlier, I'm actually possibly looking at in the future to work in the States or even in Europe, purely to broaden my skill set, broaden my mind, and have an open mind of how things are done differently abroad.
Sure.
Because again, if we're going to be global, we also need to understand different cultures. We also need to understand how their mentality works, how their thought processes work, and so for me that's key.
Absolutely.
But can I just add previously what John had said about what I mentioned about the Premier League is also, I don't believe it's race. I think it was just lack of foresight,
Right,
personally,
okay.
in my opinion. And that goes back to closed mindsets. What John
Right,
just
coming to the end of our programme, gentlemen, I got loads of other questions.
Yeah.
I got a few messages here from viewers, but unfortunately we ran out of time. So very quickly, John, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
When's your book coming out?
So the book comes out in 2019, so it's
Right.
next winter, spring,
All right.
and it will be associated with a CPD program for professionals in the sector.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So we'll keep you posted, and John, hopefully, you can join us once the books come out.
I'd love to.
Raj,
Thank
again,
you.
thank you very much for your time. And from now on, in terms of obviously, read Raj's book, very inspirational. And
Thank you.
what's next for you? Hopefully, you're going to come on the show again for us.
It's
at
been a
some
pleasure,
point.
and I'd love to. And again, if there's if I can help anyone from any background, that's what I'd like to set up eventually as well, and show people what they need to do in football, because it's not just simple going in, and there's a lot to learn,
Okay.
and that's something I'd like to pass on.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
you guys.
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank you,
inspirational
Thank you.
words and your comments here, and I think the viewers enjoyed that. But very quickly before we go, congratulations to Nobbygonj FC for winning the tournament, Upazila tournament a few weeks ago. And this Sunday there is another tournament in London, the District Cup. So Mabley Green, so get yourself down there. Hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks' time with another exciting show, and hopefully we'll have Abdal back as well. So see you all soon, and thanks for joining us.